Hi, thank you very much for volunteering to become a Seagrass Ocean Rescue Archive researcher with North Wales Wildlife Trust. So I'm just going to run through a little bit of what we do as part of the project and how you can get involved and what that will actually involve as part of what we have to offer here. So I'll just run through a little bit of the training to start with. So what is seagrass? So I'll give you a bit of context so we can understand what's going on and then hopefully be able to picture what we do and the importance of it in context of restoration and conservation of the seagrass. So seagrass. So seagrass are flowering plants and they have a rooted system, as you can see on the images here. So each of the seagrass plants have these roots and they're connected by these rhizomes. So it's a real sort of interconnected habitat. It's a really great species. And they're so different to algae and seaweeds, as algae don't have these roots. They have these holdfasts which attach onto rocks. So that's a major difference. Seagrass then also have leaves. So when they're fully formed and the leaves grow up towards the surface, they form these dense meadows under the sea. So seagrass, as they are plants, they're flowering plants, they do photosynthesize. So they do live and they're required to live in quite shallow, sheltered areas where sunlight is able to penetrate through the water. So that generally is in either the intertidal or the subtidal of our coastlines. So the image on the right here, we have seagrass along the intertidal, and this is maybe something that you've come across whilst you've been out and about on the beach. And when the tide goes out and you're at the lowest tide, the exposed part of the beach, which would normally then get covered as the tide goes in and out, is called the intertidal. And then this is where some of the seagrass is. So it just sort of looks a little bit just hidden up and it's hidden in amongst the other seaweeds. But this, in fact, is the seagrass. And when the tide comes back in, then it floats around again and acts as this fantastic habitat for all sorts of different species that we've got across Wales. So there are actually over 50 species of seagrass worldwide, but we have 4 species here in the UK. So that 2 tasselweeds and 2 zostera species. So they're commonly known as eelgrass. So as you can see on the left here, we've got our common eelgrass, the Zostera marina, and the dwarf eelgrass, the Zostera knowltii. So the common eelgrass, the Zostera marina, is the eelgrass, the seaweed, the seagrass, which is the most common, most prevalent across Wales. And it's higher, it's taller compared to the dwarf eelgrass. But the Zostera knowltii, the dwarf, also does pop up here and there and everywhere. Like we've got quite nice populations and habitats of that as well. But unfortunately, the seagrass that we have across Wales, across much of the UK actually, is in massive decline. So there's a 39% decline in seagrass since the 1980s. And a decline of in the 40% since the 1930s. As you can see on the map on the left, there is quite a nice amount of it in North Wales here. So we're actually in a very lucky location here, quite privileged to be able to have some seagrass left here. But it's just about protecting what we've still got and trying to restore so we can get the meadows back to what they used to be. But a few various things have caused the seagrass to be in decline. For example, disease, climate change, coastal development, etc. And then you've got boat dredging, like this in the middle. So unfortunately, this is a little bit of a common sight across a lot of our coastal areas where seagrass is quite prevalent still. And you can see the gorgeous sort of Mediterranean-looking water in the background as the seagrass sort of filters and cleans out the water as well. And then you've got these boat dredges and anchor points, the scars, which are often left. And that can then instantly, as you can see here, divide 2 seagrass meadows and just becomes a little bit of an unhealthy meadow, which ultimately could lead to its decline. But the benefits of seagrass, so what's the point of us doing all of this? Because seagrass is such an incredible species and an incredible habitat. So we restore seagrass to create habitat for thousands of marine species, provide nursery grounds for the fish we eat. So it really helps local biodiversity, local abundance of all sorts of amazing species, and a lot of species that we actually tend not to see in many other habitats locations across the UK. Helps tackle climate change. So seagrass is a massive carbon sequester. So it actually absorbs more carbon per hectare than the Amazon rainforest does. So it's a brilliant way of trying to tackle climate change as well. Helps support tourism, local economies. We have some incredible sites across here in North Wales, which has some amazing seagrass left in it. And as it's intertidal, as it's quite in shallow waters, people can just come and snorkel over it. The sunlight often glistens over it, and you've got all this amazing wildlife. So it really is incredible. And then it helps protect our coasts from erosion and flooding, because as I mentioned earlier, the seagrass has roots. They're a rooted system. So that stabilizes the seabed with its rhizome structure, which sort of, when the tide goes in and out, it sort of just takes that a little bit of edge off it. So then the full whack of the tide isn't just bashing our coasts, and helps protect floods against flooding and erosion. And then, of course, it helps promote healthy wildlife, biodiversity, and we've got all sorts of amazing species, which, yeah, you may not see in other locations as well. So Seagrass Ocean Rescue. So the project as a whole is led by ourselves. We're one of the lead delivery partners. And then we've also got Project Seagrass and WWF amongst other partners as well. So the aim really, we have so many different roles. It's absolutely incredible. But our main aim at the moment, along with the archiving, is to get out into the community groups, tell people about how incredible seagrass is, and then hopefully inspire them to take action to really do something positive for their local area. So, like, for example, we could go out and snorkel and collect some of the seagrass seeds, as you can see in the top left. We'll then take those seagrass seeds after they've been looked after and by Project Seagrass themselves, and then we'll pop the seagrass seeds into these little Hessian bags. And then these, along with a few other methods, will then get planted either intertidally or subtidally. So that will usually require divers. And then hopefully, bit by bit, we can then start forming new seagrass roots, and entire seagrass meadows would be absolutely incredible. And we also do work with young people. So we've got our Seagrass Ocean Rescues in the middle picture there. So we're actually getting filmed by Blue Peter at that point. So it's a really big, great project to get involved with, and it's definitely inspiring a lot of people to go out and do something positive for their local area, something help really tackle some quite drastic marine issues, but often without having to actually get out there, have these diving qualifications. So it's a really great, all accessible project, which we're really proud to be part of. But then when it comes to the archival research, so this is something that we're particularly proud of ourselves as well. And we're very happy to be involved with this. So our archival research will mainly involve you guys, you volunteers, people who will be trained up and will hopefully feel confident enough to then either go out with ourselves in North Wales Wildlife Trust, or to go out and conduct your own research and go out to all these various places, whether they are formal archive visits, museums, exhibitions, whether you're going out asking your friends or some older generations about the various memories and the anecdotal things that they knew about seagrass in the decades previous. Or perhaps it's a nice sort of way of just, getting together as groups, but also doing something really quite important to help with this amazing restoration project. But kind of what's the point of that? Like, if we're looking to do stuff for the future, create these new things, these new seagrass meadows, why would we want to look back in time? So there's a few main reasons. The first one being shifting baselines. So if this may have popped up already, then absolutely fantastic. But if not, I'll run through the principle of it really quickly. But it's essentially that if we will be wanting to restore and conserve something like the seagrass, we'll need something to compare it against. So for example, in the present day, if we want to recover 80% of seagrass meadows, for example, from the 1960s, then fantastic. We'll get 80% back from what it was in the 1960s. But what if in the 60s, there was only 20% of the seagrass left from compared to what there was in the 1900s? And what if that was only half what there was back in the 1850s? It's about that shift in baselines. So of course it's not quite as easy. We can't go out and figure out what there was physically in decades, a couple of hundred years ago, but we are able to research, go through the archives, find these records and see what there was out there. So then the current restoration projects, what we should do now, we're actually able to really try and get it back to what it truly was, rather than what it might have been just a couple of decades ago. Then we've also got some other really great reasons for why we do this archival research. So it also allows us to find all these incredible unknown meadows and perfect planting sites. So for example, we know essentially what we know. Like we know that there's seagrass meadows jotted around the Shin Peninsula, some around Anglesey. There's signs that there were some around Conwy, Puffin Island. But we only know that because we're able to go out and see that stuff. We're able to map it. We're able to go out and do the diving and snorkeling and map what there is right here, right now. But we're not really able to do that about things in the past, or we're not really logistically able to do that across the entire coastline of Wales, let alone the UK. So by going back in time and having a look at these archival records, we're actually able to see, oh, well, then there was a record of there being seagrass along this area, which we had no idea about. I wonder if it's still there now. And then we can then focus our searches and hopefully find some amazing seagrass that could still be there now. And that was actually the case with, fairly recently, a few weeks ago, there was a huge seagrass meadow found just off the coast of Cornwall. And for a place which is so touristy, so busy all the time, and it just got completely missed. And obviously, as I said before, the seagrass lives in quite shallow areas, but so you'd think that we'd know where these huge seagrass meadows are at the moment, but we still don't. We've still got so much to learn. And that's what's so exciting about this research. We're able to see what there was back in time, but that directly relates to what we do now. And then we understand the species lost. So some of the archival research which we'll be doing will directly involve the direct records of seagrass and the various seagrass species, but we'll also be delving into the various species and the wildlife and the animals which use or used seagrass, whether it be as a fishery habitat, feeding habitat, protective site, and all sorts of various reasons. And it'll help us understand, again, which species require or really prefer the use of seagrass in their life histories, but then also how can we then prevent those species from becoming endangered themselves. For example, by looking back in time, we actually were able to realize that our British seahorse species massively declined in abundance around the same time that seagrass started disappearing as well. So we're able to sort of put two and two together and think, oh, actually, okay, well, we know seahorses actually really enjoy, they prefer the habitat of seagrass anyway. And then seeing that correlation between seagrass and seahorse abundance declines, actually, it was like, okay, there is a bit of a link here. So that's kind of why we do it. That's the whole context of it. And there's a whole host of other reasons. But this is just something that I thought would really be able to sort of resonate with people, in the sense that we're able to see that what we do in this project with archival research, and what you will hopefully really enjoy doing, will directly respond directly relate to the actual restoration conservation work that'll be going on right now and in the future as well. So again, we've got some fantastic papers here. And here's a picture of the Nevin herring industry. So Nevin used to be renowned for its incredible herring fisheries, but then as soon as sort of the seagrass started disappearing, because the herring fishing industry collapsed as well. And again, there's a link with that as well. So these research records really help us understand that a little bit more, because herring used to use seagrass as an incredible fishery site to lay its eggs, etc. So these are the kind of records that we may come across. So a lot of the things may be just various text, quotes, you'll be looking through online and in-person newspapers, books, illustrations, images, diving records, letters, and things like this. You might find some really interesting sort of wacky ways which seagrass was used, rather than just for the wildlife that we sort of know, we want to know more about, but there's all sorts of other various uses of it. For example, Zostera marina, the common eelgrass, the most prevalent seagrass across Wales, gets harvested in Japan. That was just from the 80s. So it's these kind of things we need to really delve into things to see why seagrass has really declined and for what purpose did it serve in the decades and sometimes centuries gone by. So we're in a really good position at the moment, actually, with the Seagrass Ocean Rescue archival research, because we're able to build upon work that we've done previously with a previous project, Project Shark. And this again involved archival research, going through the same kind of records, but again looking through all sorts of different things. We've got some painted illustrations, we've got some online text, newspapers, books, diagrams. But I just wanted to include this because it sort of shows the kind of things that you may come across. And it's a lot of the records might not necessarily be completely scientific and completely with all their Latin names and exactly how you'd imagine things to be in a textbook nowadays. But they're still really important, really crucial. It's just a different way that the language was used back in the day. For example, with shark, we had a focus on 4 main shark species, one of them being angel shark, and they're highly protected now. But just a few decades ago, they were called a devilfish, a hideous monster. And then we found that a stingray was referred to as a maiden ray here in Bangor. And so again, that opened more doors, because we were able to think, oh, actually, well, we didn't realize stingray were known as maiden ray, and that's just sort of opened up a few extra lines of inquiry. We could have some distribution type records, like for example, the taupe, found in the Mediterranean, but rarely seen in the North Sea, which is quite a nice, interesting one. We've got distribution, looks, physical things. And then bottlenose shark, you might come across a few things which might not necessarily be strictly relevant, or things might have been a bit confused over time, but they're still all records. And I think that's the really important message here, is that we are looking for records, and we are hoping that those records will become and lead on to these quite important restoration things in the next few years. But a record doesn't have to be incredibly specific, incredibly scientific. It can be things like this, just a few little quotes, a little bit of information about distribution, and it'll still completely help us. And I just popped this in as well, just to see the kind of thing that we looked out for as well. So we've got some various English and Welsh records, which we did with Shark. And if anyone would prefer to do any record searching in Welsh, then that would be fantastic. And if not, that's totally fine. We've got plenty of English language records as well. So we want this experience to be as tailored to yourselves as well, because it's essentially a volunteer project with the help of us. The sessions that we'll be generally doing will involve either in-person searches through archives, so like formal archives, whether that be things like the Anglesey archives or museums, exhibitions, etc. But it can also include online record searching. And that could either involve your own independent research in the evenings or on your own time, or then we could have these social get-togethers, which we'll be doing in a couple of months' time as well. And then we'll be doing some anecdotal memory collections as well. So that's something that we won't have to worry about too much now. But in the next few months, that should hopefully sort of develop, and that will find its way in this as well. Past research that we've done went really well, but we did have some feedback, and that's something that's really quite exciting about the Seagrass Ocean Rescue archiving, is that we're able to build upon that and make sure this becomes a real volunteer project. So we asked people what they wanted to get out of this, and the main things were that they wanted a variety of session types. So that's the various socials, online things, in-person visits. Monthly would be absolutely grand. So we've got we've come up with a bit of an activity plan, and that will continue then for the next few years. And then they wanted to explore new fields, learn about the project, meet new people, and have a positive impact. And I think that's what's really exciting about this project and the archival research, is that you're able to do some real hands-on conservation, restoration type stuff, as I mentioned in the recording previously, but in the comfort of your own home. Like if you're not an avid snorkeler or a diver and you're not sure how to get into that kind of thing, but you really want to make a positive impact to your local area, then that's what's really exciting about this, because everything that we'll be doing here will have a sort of knock-on effect on how the Seagrass Ocean Rescue Project will develop in the next few years. We'll be sending this crib sheet, so I'm not going to go through every single step-by-step thing like this just now, but we've tried to make it as super easy, as straightforward, and as simplistic as possible. And it essentially gives us a bit of a rough idea of the kind of things we want to try and get out of the project. So here, the crib sheet is mainly for the online stuff. So if anyone wanted to do some online independent research, we've got the National Library of Wales resource, which has a whole host of newspapers, and it's super easy, super straightforward, all online, and you can pick dates and what date range you want to do, what newspaper, and then we'll allocate you the newspaper if that was of interest. The keywords, so the keywords you'll be searching for, and then any records, relevant records will then pop up. And then it's just a case of sifting through them, seeing what's relevant, seeing what's not, and just making sure you're recording as you go, even if you don't necessarily find anything relevant. So these are some of the keywords to search for. So obviously you've got your seagrasses, your eelgrass, and your zostera Latin names there as well. But then, as I mentioned earlier, you've got a whole host of species which could live in amongst the seagrass, use it for various reasons. And it's that sort of indirect archival research by finding these various species, which actually might be the key link between knowing what seagrass species we had where and what actually then caused that decline. As I said previously, with the seahorse, we noticed that the seahorse species across the UK plummeted in abundance around the same time that seagrass meadows started disappearing as well. So there's that sort of direct link. So we've got all sorts of various species. These are just a few examples. But again, we've got some of our pipefish, our sharks, our turtles, some of our fish species like the herring, and then we've got some Welsh ones as well. So if ever there's a point that anyone would like to do any Welsh record searching, then we've got plenty to look through as well there. And then we come to the actual recording of the things that we've searched through. So we've got two forms, and then this is the case of whether it's online record searching or in person. And so we've got our search and our record logs. So the first one, sort of the overarching one, is the search log, and we'll have one of those sheets for every visit or every travel out somewhere, every sort of online newspaper, that kind of thing. So here we've got the broad umbrella stuff. So for example, we've looked through the North Wales Chronicle online. We can note that it was a newspaper, and then we can note which keywords we used. So whether that's just something specific, like we've just gone through seagrass and seahorse, or whether you've gone through absolutely every single one. Pop down the dates of search results. Again, that's super easy if it's online because it's just right there for you. And it's generally just something that's that you're aware of anyway, even if it's an in-person record. And then you record the number of relevant results. So sometimes you won't find any, like the Barry Doc News Online, for example, there were none, and that's totally fine, but it's still important to record that just so that a future volunteer or one of us then doesn't have to go back and re-look through things and we just end up doing the same work again. So it's always important to pop things down. But if you do find relevant records, like here, we found a couple here, we then go on to the record log. So we've got a record theme, which is the same column on each of the search and record logs. So for example, if I go onto the search log and I'm looking for Seagrass in Porthaillan record, and I know it's in Northwest Chronicle Online, I know it was around 1850 to 1990. So let's go look for it. So I look for it in the record log, go through the record theme, Seagrass in Porthaillan, and then that's where you put your record information. Again, you've got your source name, your record date, and then you've got record details. So this doesn't need to be something super specific. You definitely don't need to be writing essays, but it's just a case of trying to get as much information in there as possible. If you've got any sort of figures or digits or anything like that, then brilliant. Sometimes you'll come across some quite specific scientific things. Other times you could just come across some quotes. It sometimes as well might just be a photograph. So just record what you've got in the photograph. And then quite important as well is to mention, it's always really, it always helps us to if a photograph or a screenshot is taken, because it then confirms the result, confirms your record, and then we can then continue to use that record going forward. It's if you do take photos and you found records and you've got these screenshots, we do ask just one small thing, and that's just to rename that photograph or the screenshot as the same record theme as what you've used in the record and search logs, just so that everything ties together. Because it might be very obvious that day when we've gone and found the record, but if we then don't look back to it for another few weeks or months, it might just become a little bit confusing. And I know that's quite a lot of information to sort of throw at everyone, but it will all be in the crib sheet, which was on the previous slide. So that will be sent around to everyone as well. And it just gives a really simple, easy, step-by-step way of doing things. And if you do come along to any in-person visits, any in-person archives, then we've got this little pack all printed out for you as well.